This is Justin, and for my Journal of Accountancy article summary, I'm going to be talking about the article Responding to the Gig Economy in the October 2019 edition. So first of all, before I get into the content, I want to talk about what the gig economy means. So that's a term that I'm going to be using throughout the presentation, and it refers to anyone who's an independent worker or self-employed, non-traditional, which could be things like a contractor or like a business consultant or even an Uber driver, someone like that. But basically, that's what the gig economy is. It encompasses all those workers. And this article talks about how CPAs specifically can work for members of the gig economy and how that's a growing need in the market. So there's four main points talked about in this article. The first of which is the growing need for CPAs working for members of the gig economy. The second of which is what a CPA does for an independent worker. The third is the differences between working for a company and then doing CPA work for an independent person. And the fourth is the significance and impact that a CPA can have on an independent worker. So for the first thing, one of the stats mentioned in the article is that there's been an increase from 10% to 15% of the U.S. The percentage of the U.S. workers are now self-employed or independent workers. They would fall into that gig economy category. So that means more than 1 in 8 of every U.S. worker is actually an independent worker and would fall into this gig economy category. So there is a growing need then for CPAs or just financial professionals in general to work with these gig economy workers and help them manage their complicated taxes and financial management. So moving on to the second point, what a CPA does specifically for these people, one of their traditional primary function has been to work with independent workers just around tax season to help them file their taxes. It's very complicated for someone who's just an independent owner of their business to file personal and business taxes separately, but that's something that a CPA can help them do. But what's now happening and what this article is kind of focusing on is something that many firms now, including one that was just started here in Indianapolis, have been trying to do, which is giving more financial management strategies for independent workers in the gig economy. And basically they're able to give specific financial advice to make sure that these workers are managing their finances properly and that their businesses are sustainable and profitable. So basically, actually I'm going to move on now to the third point, and it talks about, in the article, the differences between working for a business versus working for an independent worker. And it mainly highlights that communication and meetings are very different when you're working for someone independent versus working for a business. And when you're working for someone independently, what the article recommends is that the CPA reaches out to all of their clients individually and asks what the best method of communication is for them. And it recommends that a CPA explores a lot more less traditional, more informal methods, such as things like Facebook Live or FaceTime, even things like that. Because people who are just working for themselves, there's not that big pressure around it with a business environment where you have a bunch of different business people you're communicating with and a lot higher, I don't want to say higher stakes, but the business environment's a lot more high pressure maybe than just working for someone independently. So that's kind of how it's different in that regard. And then one of the really interesting aspects of CPAs working for independent workers is the heightened impact and significance that their work can have. So for a CPA to be working for a bunch of specific independent workers, they're able to develop the one-on-one relationship with the client, and they're able to really see how their work is specifically helping this one person, how it's helping their business or their work to be much more successful, and how it's really impacting their life. Because for someone who owns their own business or just operates independently, the way their business or their independent work, the way how that goes financially can really determine how their whole life looks in a financial sense. So there's a really heightened impact there, and that's something that a lot of CPAs have been, why it's drawing a lot of CPAs to that industry. So how it relates back to our class, there's not a ton of direct relationship in terms of financial management strategies, but it is an interesting career opportunity and kind of a different method to a career that's out there. And it's just a really interesting thing to look at with how CPAs aren't having to just traditionally work in like public accounting or work for businesses like that, but how they can also work for people who have in their own independent industries. And that's it's a new form. It's a new opportunity for CPAs to have work, and it's been a really successful one for many firms, including some here in the Indianapolis area. So thank you for listening.